Back in 2010, the Dark Reign run of the Punisher took a drastic left turn when this one-shot comic came out of nowhere in between issues 10 and 11. This Punisher profile is over FrankenCastle. Punisher during the Marvel Dark Reign timeline just hit differently for me, and is top notch in my book. Although, with my plans to reread most of the stories of the Punisher over the next year, we'll see if that opinion holds up, but something that didn't quite hold up was old Frank, who at this point had survived an encounter with the Century, joined the Thunderbolts, and nearly assassinated Osborn himself, ends up getting killed by one of Wolverine's sons named Daken. How does this happen? Ambushed with a full police force, trapped in the sewer, brutalized in an intense fight, the claw-wielding mutant fully dismembers Frank's limbs and head and kicks it all in the gutter. From there, the reader is transported to Monster Island, where a samurai-looking guy named Yamamoto is on a mission to destroy all the inhabitants, which serves as our framework story as we get taken back to the Punisher's body parts, which are being gathered by some small sewer monsters with the force of Marvel's scariest green being behind them, Man-Thing. The monsters are looking for a savior against those who are trying to exterminate them, and in the process bring back our protagonist as a patchwork monster flesh machine referred to as FrankenCastle. A few quickfire facts we are given is that in this form, FrankenCastle must take pills regularly in order to keep his mind intact. The de facto leader of the monsters, Morbius, is hiding the Bloodstone, which ends up being the whole reason why his people are being attacked in the first place. And with watching the most recent butchering of the monsters, Punisher is now down for the cause. Outside the Punisher Max series, the following kills we get are some of the more brutal that you'll see in your average Punisher comic. It is not long before we are treated to a series of flashbacks that flesh out the mechanical villain, Robert Hellsguard, revealing he is 150 years young, lived through killing all 78 members of his village, including his wife and kids, while they were being turned into werewolves. And it isn't until teaming up with the infamous Ulysses Bloodstone that Hellsguard engineers his own mech armor suit, being armed to the gills and described as a walking Iron Maiden song. During these flashbacks, we even get to see a showdown with the one and only Dracula, who trapped Hellsguard in the demon realm Limbo for 70 years, kept alive only by a suit. After getting released by the Japanese kaiju hunter and scientist named Yamamoto Takahashi, the two team up first to hunt and kill Japanese monsters before turning their eyes on anything else that could bear that label, before moving on to Murlocs, mutants, and normal people who happen to just have physical disfigurements. This quest for the Bloodstone is to rejuvenate Hellsguard's body so that he has the strength to be able to cleanse the earth of all monsters. Some serious strong Nazi vibes are going on for this guy, which is all but confirmed on the next issue, where we get to see Punisher mowing down Nazi zombies at Hellsguard's castle. This part of the story is when we stop getting as much plot and get more narrative pushing story and action. After getting ambushed in their home base and countless monsters butchered for the Bloodstone, it was retrieved by Hellsguard, who then retreats to enjoy his new boon. The next issue of FrankenCastle becomes one of the most metal of all, having the main protagonist reincarnated as a mechanical human patchwork beast, riding into a Nazi castle on a giant fire-breathing dragon, mowing down techno samurais with a Gatling gun to save a vampire from a death robot. Hells yeah. Things definitely get wild, with some amazingly dry one-liners regularly sprinkled throughout, and us getting a new reason to let Frank withstand inhuman damage. It does not take long until we get a dimension-hopping battle between FrankenCastle and the mechanical Hellsguard that the Punisher barely survives, but in the end regains the precious Bloodstone and leaves Hellsguard broken in the demon realm. Back at the monster stronghold, they are left weighing the options of letting FrankenCastle succumb to the intense wounds that they could not repatch, or to implant the Bloodstone in the Punisher, which will definitely heal him, but could also spell doom for the underground community if Frank lost control again. With the logic that it'd be harder to get stolen, as well as wanting to repay the efforts of Castle, the decision is made to implant the stone. With recovery taking place slowly, it is now time for more revenge, as FrankenCastle refocuses on the ones who previous to his transformation had used his dead family as tools in an attempt to bring the Punisher down, which leads to the undead anti-hero going on a trip to Tokyo. First up, Lady Gorgon and her splinter cell of hand ninjas, which serves as a good warm-up for the main conflict. The man who took his life and made the Dark Reign timeline brutal for the Punisher, none other than Daken. Most conflicts so far have been contained within an issue or two, even Hellsguard, but this main event spans across 4 comics between the series Daken had going, Dark Wolverine, and FrankenCastle, each getting 2 issues, with part 1 starting off Dark Wolverine. Just a small amount of context on the Dark Reign before we get into things. Extreme Cliff Notes version. Things have not been good for our main Avengers at this time, all being out of the picture for one reason or another, and Norman Osborn, who is recently credited for saving the Earth against the Skrull invasion, has now come in to take power over Stark Enterprises, including a lot of Iron Man suits. He paints one up in Stars and Stripes, and then becomes an amalgam of Captain America and Iron Man, calling himself Iron Patriot. Still up to his old tricks, but using his good fortune with the public, he forms an Avenger team that he can control and refers to as the Dark Avengers, with Daken fulfilling the Wolverine role of the group, as well as every other member being an actual villain pretending to be a hero. All this to say, even though a proud killer, Daken is on top of the world with fame and power during this conflict, only really held back by an addiction he has to a drug called heat that at high doses interferes with his mutant healing ability. Something that sets Daken's power set apart from his dad's is that he has pheromone control, which he uses with word games to manipulate his foes in the heat of battle. But in this new state, FrankenCastle is unrattled by this tactic. We get an awesome fight that spans across an elevator, a Tokyo cityscape, back into the sewers, and right as Punisher is about to throw Daken into a rebar pit site and filled with concrete, metal claws come through the back of his chest, with Wolverine stepping in to save his son's life. In a recent series, he was tricked into killing almost all of his other children he had sired over his long lifespan, so he was not ready to see another son get killed. We then get a FrankenCastle versus Wolverine battle as Daken tries his best to escape, but Big Pun keeps him in the fight as long as possible before having to scramble as well to prevent from getting caught by the police swarming the site. Noticing the bloodstone in a chest wound of Castle, Daken doesn't give himself a minute past regenerating to bring the fight back to the Punisher, this time gaining the upper hand and ripping the bloodstone from his chest, proceeding by going crazy with the power. Almost out of the game, FrankenCastle gets an extra life thanks to a power line charge assisted by Wolverine, who now knows Daken with the bloodstone is going to be too much trouble to ignore. Frank and Logan then team up in order to bring us the climax of the punishment arc. Next is a solid banter-filled fight, bullying up to Castle noticing how the bloodstone is reacting to the mutant healing. He implants a grenade in Daken's chest, and the ensuing explosion causes a crazy flesh-like Akira growth to go outward, covering the rooftop. Unlike Akira though, this appears to basically be the equivalent of tumors, and it has left Daken basically a living splat until Wolverine forcibly removes the bloodstone from Daken's body, returning it to FrankenCastle in order to save his life. Before Logan can retrieve his son to lock him up, the boy somehow escapes. Issue 21 of the 2010 Punisher run is the last of the FrankenCastle arc, which started on issue 11. FrankenCastle is left abandoned on a monster island, which gives him time to recover into a normal Frank body again, but now is getting a little crazy from the influence of the stone, which cues the entrance of the leaders of the monsters, as well as Elsa Bloodstone, who's there to help get the stone back. After besting all of them in combat, he is convinced that the stone has made him lose sight of his devotion, which is to kill only those who deserve it. This brings us back to Frankie's home ground, New York City, with a refocus on his personal war to punish those who need it. At the time of this series release, I know I was a little put off at first, fearing I was losing my favorite Punisher series, Dark Reign, to be replaced by a gimmick series. And yes, this is definitely a gimmick series, but for some reason it worked for me back then, and now I feel I enjoy it even more. It was really cool to see a way of doing something crazy with the Punisher character within the main 616 universe that allowed for the character's death, an afterlife story, as well as a return to the standard formula. With all the monsters between werewolves, zombies, vampires, and a plethora of other beings of the night, it was a great read to do during the spooky October month. Next month, we are back to the Punisher live action appearances, covering the 2004 Thomas Jane Punisher film. Until then, we have plenty more spooky content for this month, and then back to Gundams, gaming, and general nerddom. So make sure to subscribe for more, and use the like button to help the channel out. Until next time, have a good one.